Good morning. I was thinking as, you ever get to a place where you just need to be touched by God? Sometimes, you just get to that place where I just need a touch from God. I just need to hear something positive. I just need to have my faith built up or something to that effect. And I kind of had a day like that yesterday, and I thought, we have wonderful tools anymore, and so I just Googled testimonies about answered prayer, and I'll tell you, I was blessed. How many knows you can be blessed by hearing about other people's prayers and God answering them? I just kind of share one with you, and I don't know that I'll get it totally exactly right, because when I read something, I usually read pretty fast and try to get the gist of it and go on to the next one, and anyways, I was reading pretty fast, but if I got the understanding, and I believe I do, it was back during one of the wars, and an American soldier had fathered a child, and from a different foreign country, and this child had never met its father, had never knew its father, and one day they just said a simple prayer, and they said, "I'd like to have a reunion with my father." I believe it was actually grandfather. The grandbaby was praying this prayer, and he said it just was a half-hearted prayer, and he'd forgot about it, and kind of went on ahead with his life, anyways, somehow there was an American in this foreign country, and he was riding his bike, doing, I think, some touring or something, and he got off the main road somehow and happened to be going by this person's, I think it was his sister that this guy was going by, and his bike tire went flat right there. And so he had to go to his sister and ask for help, to get his tire fixed. And she helped him, and he was an American, so I think they knew the soldier's name. So they said to him, "Do you know this man?" And said his name, and he said, "Yeah, I think I do." He said, "I believe he pastors my grandma's church." And through that connection, they was able to have a reunion. And they had tried before to find this person and couldn't find him, but how many believes God answers prayer? Amen. I was thinking today that, one day there was a man of God, and he prayed that it would rain. And he sent his servant down the road and said, "Look, see if you see a cloud." And he come back and he said, "Nope, don't see no cloud." And I don't know how many did this several times, and finally he said, "You know what? I see a cloud about the size of a hand." Amen. God answers prayer, don't he? I want to encourage you today. Maybe you are in that place where you just need something to prick your spirit. I want you to know that God answers prayer. Amen. St. John chapter 15, 1 through 8. "I am the true vine, and my Father is the husband. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away, and every branch that beareth fruit, he purges it, that it may bring forth more fruit. Now you are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you. Abide in me, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can can ye, except ye abide in me. I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. If a man abide not in me, he is cast forth as a branch, and is withered, and men gather them, and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If ye abide in me, and my words abide in you, you shall ask what you will, and it shall be done unto you. Herein is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit, so shall ye be my disciples. So this morning we're on the last I am, and Jesus simply states, I am the true vine. And you know, we get the picture as we're reading down through there of the vine and the branches. And you know, it's an interesting thing that Jesus used here to teach on, because it's a very plain that if you abide in the vine, then you have life. And if you don't abide in the vine, you're not going to live. And you know, you can take a branch and cut it off, and it withers up and dies, doesn't it? Now, what I thought was, you know, I guess I think about, one of the things that I think about is, you know, you can take a branch and you can cut it off of a tree, and you can graft it into another rootstock, and it will live. And I believe Jesus talks about this, or God talks about this in Romans chapter 11, and verses 16 through 24, I want to read. For if the first fruits, Romans chapter 11 and verses 16 through 24. For if the first fruits be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou being a wild olive tree were grafted in among them, and with them partake of the root and the fatness of the olive tree, boast not against the branches. But if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. Thou wilt say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief, they were broken off. And thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. I want to just stop there a little bit. It says, because of unbelief, they were broken off. Or if you want to say it this way, they were separated from the vine because of unbelief. And then we were grafted in because we believed. Amen? But I want you to know that you will be broken off because of unbelief. And if we come to a place of unbelief, and I believe this is what the writer's trying to say here, that not to get high-minded, not to get, if you will, I don't know how else to say that, but holier than thou or something like that, because you were grafted in, and if you don't keep your belief in God, you can be cut off too. And so he's saying then to make sure that we stay connected to the vine. How many knows it's important? In our walk with God, how many knows it's important? Jesus said, I am the vine, and we must be connected to the vine. No other way can we have life but be connected to that vine. And so Jesus was saying this so simple here. He says, I am the vine, you are the branches. And let's go on and read, because it's going to say some things that I think needs to be. Thou wilt say then that the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off, and thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if God spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee. Behold therefore the goodness and severity of God on them which fell severity, but toward thee goodness, if thou continue in his goodness, otherwise thou also shalt be cut off. And they also, if they abide not still in unbelief, shall be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. For if thou wert cut off out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and wert grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these, which be the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? I want you to say, or I want you to know that we were by nature wild by nature, and we were from a wild olive tree, as the Bible's talking about being from a wild olive tree. In other words, it wasn't a cultured tree. It wasn't a tree that was good for anything. Let's put it that way. But because of the unbelief of the Jews, we, which were wild by nature, were grafted in to this, I'm going to say, to this vine. Jesus said, I am the vine. We by nature were wild, no good, cut off from God, but we were grafted into this root. And how many knows that we now can be a good branch? Because we were grafted into a good root. And this root stock then makes us, remember we read up above that if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. And because we have a holy God, and we're grafted in to this, we become a good branch. The only way we can become a good branch is to be grafted onto this good root. And then, how many knows when we read over there in St. John, he said, I am the true vine, and he expects us then to begin to bear good fruit. I was kind of a little bit, I didn't know exactly. How many knows every root bears fruit? That's how the plants, they repopulate themselves, is by the fruit that they bear. You know, they bear this fruit. In the natural realm, it grows up, it bears its fruit, the fruit falls down into the ground, and it grows another plant or bush or whatever you want to say. Every bush, every root, if you will, at some point or another will bear fruit. How many know there's a season for fruit, for this plant to bear? In other words, you won't have peaches in the dead of winter because that's not the season for that. Well, I believe that Jesus was talking to us, and he said, I think I want to go to St. John in chapter 4. Because this gives us a good illustration of fruit. This is about the Samaritan woman. And I want to read from verse 7 down to verse 24. There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus saith unto her, Give me to drink. For his disciples were gone away into the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Here is a wild branch, but it's getting ready to be grafted on to good root. And that's why I'm wanting to bring this morning, to see how you can take how a person can be a wild branch. How many of you could say at one point in my life, I was a wild branch? You know, I was getting a load of calves here the other day, and this guy had put this load together for me, and he was riding with me, showing me where to go to pick them up, and of course I've dealt with him before, so he knows that I'm a preacher, and he started talking to me and asking me some questions, and I told him this. I said, you know, when I was running around, I doubt that any of the guys that I was running around with would have ever thought that I would preach. Amen. The guys I was running around with, that was the farthest thing from their mind. I think that Jim Gebner might someday preach the gospel. I was a wild olive branch. But I was grafted in to a good root. How many knows that makes a difference? And this woman's going to be grafted in. Then saith the woman of Samaria to him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritan. Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me drink, thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. And the woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? And Jesus answered and said unto her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up in the everlasting life. The woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. And Jesus saith unto her, Go call thy husband, and come hither. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. And Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband, for thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that sayest thou truly. The woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jesus said unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain, nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship you know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. I also want to go to same chapter, verses 34 and through 38. Jesus said unto them, My meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work. Say not ye, There are yet 4 months, and then cometh harvest. Behold, I say unto you, Lift up your eyes, and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. And he that reapeth receiveth wages, and gathereth fruit unto life eternal, that both he that soweth and he that reapeth may rejoice together. And herein is that saying true, one soweth and another reap. I sent you to reap, that whereon you bestow no labor, other men labored, and you have entered into their labors. Okay, we're talking about, Jesus said, I am the vine, and ye are the branches. We know then that there is a time also for reaping and for the grafting in of us who are wild by nature, or if you want to say it some other way, we could say rebellious by nature. How many knows we're rebellious people? By nature, we're a rebellious people. And somehow, some way, because we have come to the Lord and we have believed in what Jesus has done, we have been grafted in to this root, and now we should bear much fruit. And how many, I believe, I wanted to go this route today because one of the things that I have found throughout this study is that without Jesus and what he done for us, there is not one thing that we could do. We would be lost forever, separated from God, but because Jesus is the vine, we can be grafted in to that vine and have life and have it eternally, because we can be grafted into that root. We who are wild by nature, we who did, if you will, had no desire to serve God. You know, I was talking to somebody this week, and I was talking to him about God, and this person finally said to me, he said, I don't want to hear that. That's being rebellious and wild by nature. I believe God's able to save. Amen? Somebody that says, I don't want to hear it. I believe that God's able to, for them to be grafted into that good root, and that someday they can bear fruit, because they can be grafted in to the root that is holy. Now, I also felt to go this way because this is our last I am, and you know, Jesus said, I am the good shepherd, and my sheep follow me. Linda and I was at a meeting this week, area ministers meeting, and this pastor made this statement. He said, unless I hear from God, I will not move. In other words, he said, what he was saying was, I'm not going to do anything unless I know it's God's will. And I was telling Linda before church this morning, instantly when he said that, I thought, yeah, that's a good thing. But can you really do that? Because of our nature, you see, yeah, that's a good thing. We should be drawn from this root. The root is what brings the life up to the branches. And then the branches go on and bear fruit. But it's from the root that the life comes up. It's from the root that the nutrients are brought up into the tree. You know, there's an interesting thing that I thought about also. Do you know, like a corn plant, when it's growing, if the weather's not right, at a certain point, it will begin to cannibalize itself to put on the fruit. In other words, if the weather's not right, you know, when it's time to put on the fruit, that plant, that's what's in its, for no other way of saying it, and I don't know that I'm actually saying this right or not, but it's what's in its DNA. You know, at that time, it's got to put on the fruit. And if the conditions are not right, it'll begin to pull down itself. And an animal will do the same thing. You know, you can take a cow or something like that, and she, at a certain point, she begins to put all of her energy and all of her whole being is to put life into that baby. And if the conditions are not right, she will begin to lose weight, and her weight will go into putting on that baby, growing that baby, and she actually will begin to cannibalize herself. We need to come to that place, church, where in our DNA we would cannibalize ourselves to see a birth take place, to see the seed come forward. I'm saying this to you today because, like I said, we begin to understand, and like the pastor said, unless I hear from God, I will not move. In other words, what he was really saying was this: I'm not going to have just another program. I'm not going to do something just because every other church is doing this. I'm telling you, church, there is a multitude of churches full today that I believe that they are not even close to doing God's will, because they're not truly abiding in the vine. You know, they have their own thoughts. They have their own directions. Jesus said, I'm the good shepherd, and my sheep will hear my voice, and another they will not follow. In other words, I will not start another program just because I feel like it ought to be started. I will not do this because all the other churches are doing this. I don't know about you, but I want to hear from God. I want to hear what what the vine is saying, what the vine is the life that the vine is trying to bring up to us. I want to be in a place like the prophet Samuel, I believe it was. He said, Father, order my steps. In other words, it becomes more important to us to hear what Jesus is saying, what God is saying to us, and then we do what God is saying to us. Too many times we're running around doing everything. I've got a little confession to make to you. For months, I've been so upset because I've been spending so much time with my cattle that I haven't been doing what I felt like I should be doing. But for some reason, this message and the message about the Good Shepherd, and also what the pastor said about I'll not do nothing until I hear from Jesus. All of a sudden I thought, last night, God, you have blessed me by keeping me so busy that I haven't got out here running around doing my own thing. Because if the Lord hadn't kept me busy, I'd have been doing some things. And I'd have thought they were good things. And if God would have blessed the church, I'd have been patting myself on the back saying, oh, what a good pastor you are. But I've come to the place where I say, God, I'm probably the worst pastor around. But I'll will not move until I hear from you. I believe God's getting ready to do some things. I can see, how many knows? Listen, I'm talking to you this morning, just plain out talking to you. The Bible says you can't put new wine in old wineskins. I feel God's, I feel chills going up and down my arms this morning. He's wanting to do a new work. We've got to be willing to hear his voice. We've got to hear his voice. You know, I thought about the Apostle John and how he was put on the Isle of Patmos. And they put him there because they didn't want him preaching. They didn't like what he was preaching, so they thought they'd put him on the Isle of Patmos. And they'd get rid of him. But I want you to know, John said on the Lord's day, he was in the Spirit. Amen? And what did he do? He got a revelation from God. Church, we need to be in the Spirit. We need to hear what this root is saying to us, what the life that it's trying to bring forth. We need to hear what the shepherd is saying to us. If we're going to be a church 20 years from now, it's going to be because we hear God today, or tomorrow, or the next day. We have got to hear God. We've got to let him be our shepherd. We've got to be willing to follow him. We've got to be willing to let go of things that I'm not trying to say that we get rid of everything old because it's old. I'm not trying to say that. But what I am saying, if we are truly a branch and we're truly grafted into that root, then the life has to come from the root. We don't make the life. We don't dictate to the root. The root sends the life to us. That's what I'm trying to say today. We have got to hear what the root is telling us. We've got to hear. Listen, in the book of Revelation, he says, John says, I think it's about 7 times, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying. We have got to come to that place where we hear the shepherd's voice, or where we're abiding in the vine, to the point that we will not move until we hear from God. And then, possibly, when we pray, we can say, hey, go look, see if there's a cloud coming. Nope, no cloud coming. Well, go look again. You see, the man of God had enough confidence in his prayers that he would simply say, well, go look again, because it's going to rain. How many of us have that kind of confidence in God? I'm here to tell you, if we're drawing from the root, we should have that kind of confidence. Because we're not going to exist without the root. You see, this, if you want to hit the nail on the head, right here is where it happens. This is where we as churches are failing God. We're not letting Him be the root. We're trying to take on, I got to do this, I got to do that. And it's like last night I just came to that place, I thought, oh God, you have saved me from myself by keeping me busy. I believe harvest season for this church is here. I believe you're going to see God just begin to send people to this church. Not because of what we did. You see, that was with Gideon. He took away all his men because he said, you know what? If you go out there with all them men, you will say, this is what we did. And he said, that's not the way it's going to be. You're going to know that it's me that's doing the work. In church, I think we're going to know without a shadow of a doubt that it's God doing the work here at Offertsville. We have to hear from Him. We have to do His. We will not move if we do not hear His voice. You know, sometimes that makes people nervous, waiting on God. I know of a time, and it's in the Bible, when people did not wait on God. And it was where Ishmael was born. I think, was it Sarah? I don't remember the name of Sarah. But she told Abraham, said, hey, take my handmaid and have children. And they didn't wait on the Lord, and it's fouled up a lot of things. In church today, if we'll not hear from God, we'll not truly have the move of God. You know, I thought about, we've had great revivals, if you want to call them that, where God came to a certain place and He moved in fabulous and wonderful ways, and things happened and miracles happened and this happened and that happened. And you know, every one of them works seems like they died down. You know why I believe they died down? Because men began to have their programs. And when men began to have their programs, and they began to try to control this and try to control that, after a while it seemed like the work just weakened. And it wasn't like it was at one time. I don't know about you, but I want to see God work and do the things I know He's capable of doing. And so if we're going to see that, we're going to have to be the branches connected to the vine. And the life is going to have to come from the vine to the branches. And that's the only way it can be. How many knows you can take away the branch and the root will still live? But you take away the root and the branch will die. So Jesus said, I am the true vine. In other words, I am the good vine. I am the vine that if you're hooked onto me, you will have life. And not only will you have life, but you will have a fruitful life. Church, I believe there's a multitude of people in this world that do not know what their calling is, because they've never connected themselves to the root enough to get that understanding. As a church today, I'm challenging you. Let's get connected to the root, to the point that if we're not connected to the root, we're not alive. Amen. I want to stop there. I want to challenge you, church, to think about the root. And you being connected to the root. What does that mean to you? What does it mean in your life? Somehow I think if we would truly think about that, how many knows it change our lives? If we realize we're connected like a branch is to the root. And the life comes from the root. Things that we think are so important may not be all that important, because it might not be the life coming from the root. I challenge you to begin to think about that, about being connected to the root. We're dismissed in Jesus' name.